Aloha and welcome back. Today we are with Andy Ellis. He is running for governor of Maryland in the Green Party. And all my people that follow me ask me what the Green Party is doing in the off season or the non-presidential elections. So I'm going around trying to find Green Party people. I'm running in Hawaii. Andy, like I said, is running for governor of Maryland. Andy, will you give us a little bit of, or give us your background, and then yeah, let's go from there. Give us your background.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for having me on today. I'm always happy to talk to folks who are looking to, do the good work and tell the stories about it. I grew up mostly in Maryland. I went to high school here. I went to college here. My whole family lives here. I lived here most of my life. And I grew up in a house where my mom was a Democrat, my dad was a Republican,
Nice.
sort of typical DC area type of thing. As I grew older, I realized that both of those options didn't really sort of align with my values and with the solutions that were important to me. And I had always been skeptical of the two-party system, but at some point, and I had voted Green for a while on and off, but some point around 2015, when Freddie Gray was killed by the Baltimore City Police, and there was a big uprising here. We're around the 10-year anniversary of that right now. I looked around and I realized that the kind of solutions we needed to the problems that led to the police murdering Freddie Gray weren't going to come from either of the two parties, and that we needed to build the power in order to have a better solution so we could save, future Freddie Grays from ever being in that position, ever being killed, and the city from ever having to respond like Baltimore did.
Right on. So you've been in the Green Party since 2015 and pretty active, right?
Yep. Since about 2015, I've been a Baltimore City co-chair of the party. I've been a Maryland co-chair of the party. I've been on national committees. I ran for office in 2018. I've been involved in a bunch of different campaigns yeah, so I'm in a decade of pretty serious grinding for the Green Party at this point. It leads well into running for governor in 2026.
Right on. And so one of the things I tell people about, they ask me about Jill Stein a lot, and they say what's she doing. I know she does a lot of activism, right? But they don't really promote it a whole lot to where a lot of people see it. Can you tell me like what you've done with the Green Party or with the Green Party in Maryland, and if you know like nationally over the time that you've been in the Green Party, like the things that they've done, so that people just know what they're doing in the 3 years off and not just running the election.
Yeah, first of all, I think a whole lot of Greens are really, really active in their community, and a lot of times they do it in protest activism, or they're involved in organizations, or they're involved in mutual aid, or things like that. And I think that a lot of times they're not necessarily doing it flying a Green Party flag or flying a
Right.
banner. They're just doing the work. They're just
Right.
going out there and making sure people in their community have what they need, that they're working together to do things, that they're working on policy things. And so I think a lot of times people don't see Greens doing this stuff is because they don't know the people they see doing this stuff might actually be Greens.
Exactly.
So that's one part of it. The
Mm-hmm.
second part of it is, we've been really involved in a couple of things here. Most recently, in 2024, I was the leader of a group called Baltimore for Democracy, and we were one of the organizations that was fighting against a charter amendment that was put forth by a sort of right-wing media mogul who owns Sinclair Broadcasting. It would have cut our city council in half, and it would have decreased representation for folks. So charter amendments are like our local citizen initiatives, our local constitution type of thing. I was the chair of a group that led to the defeat of that. It's the first time we defeated one of those charter amendments in 20 years in Baltimore, and that was pretty
Okay.
significant. There's other Greens here in Maryland who are involved in an effort called the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition. And the Bethesda Africa Cemetery Coalition is fighting to defend a piece of what used to be black-owned church, black-owned community, black-owned cemetery that is being developed by county developers, by big business and things like that. So they are fighting in court, they are protesting in the streets, they are fighting through the legislative venue in order to get the descendants of those folks to have access to be able to control the cemetery. So those are two really good examples. There's other Greens who have been on the ground on environmental struggles. There's other Greens who have been on the ground on labor struggles. There's other folks who are showing up at their county council meeting every week and making sure that, the water rates don't get risen as the
Mm-hmm.
politicians, conspire with with the companies and things like that. So Greens are out there. We're active. We're always doing stuff. And maybe sometimes I think we're almost doing so much stuff, we don't have the time to tell the stories about it
Right.
the same way the Democrats have the way to tell the stories about what they're doing. We're not taking selfies when we show up at these things. We're just getting our hands dirty.
Cool. So that's that is kind of what I told people, and I've had a few people tell me, well, you got to kind of just advertise it. You got to kind of get it out there, whether you want to or not, a little bit. And so I don't know. I think that's a thing that we as Green Party people need to start doing is maybe designate one of the people at the event to be a camera person, right? And just go around and make sure we film it and make sure we get the stuff and put it online because, like, I know the Greens do a lot of good. I've seen them do a lot of good, but they just don't get the publicity for it and people don't know about it because, mainstream media ain't going to talk about Green Party people doing stuff.
Totally. We got to be seen being green. And that means, yeah, sometimes we got to take pictures when we're out at a cleanup. We shouldn't go, like, one thing I think is different is like sometimes I think that there's Democratic politicians and Republican politicians even who go to these things so they can take the picture.
Right.
Um, and I think we need to go to the thing because we need to go to the thing, but we also got to take the picture. It doesn't cost anything to put it on Instagram. Doesn't cost anything to put it out there, and then we can highlight the good work we're doing. The other day I went to an event that was put on by a group of young folks who fought in South Baltimore against an environmental injustice where a trash incinerator had been designated as renewable energy. And so the state of Maryland had designated trash incineration as renewable energy,
That's
and it was
kind of
right
weird.
in these people's community. And for a long time, they fought against it. And finally, this year, they got the Maryland General Assembly to change that. And a couple days later, I was at an event that they were putting on to talk about their years of struggle. And it's not just about that. There's a coal pile that's in their neighborhood, there's medical incinerators that are in their neighborhood, and they're fighting all of that. So taking pictures and say, I'm going to that is not just promotion to say, hey, I'm going to this thing. It's also important to highlight the work that they're doing to an audience that may not otherwise see it, but may pay attention to Greens.
Right on. Okay. So I read that you have chickens.
We
Are
have
you into
chickens,
like
yep.
permaculture or anything like that?
So, we have a pretty much we have looked into we have done at various points of turning our sort of urban quarter-acre yard into a pretty sustainable garden with very little grass.
Nice.
At different points, we've grown different amounts of food. We've done different cultures. We've done all sorts of those different things. But we have organic chickens, organic yard farm, a lot of native plants in our yard. I think grass is one of the worst things like that I
Yes.
can imagine. And we live in a part of the city. We live in Baltimore City, but we live in a part of the city where most people have single unit homes, or single family homes, and they've got big yards. And I'd love to see more of my neighbors planting pollinators, having chickens,
Right.
planting vegetables, and see what we can exchange. We do that with some folks already. When we have some surplus, we give it to them. They give us their stuff. And I think models like that can work in cities. I think they can work in rural areas, and I even think they could work in the suburbs if the homeowners associations will allow it. So
Right. Yes. That's something I've thought about a lot too. Neighborhood like organizing certain trees in different yards and everybody sharing different fruits and vegetables and all that.
yeah,
So I'm
yeah,
into that. Um, so what are your top two, three issues on your campaign that you guys are going to be fighting for?
yeah. So I mean, I think we're grounded pretty seriously in sort of basic Green Party values, grassroots democracy, social justice, peace, and ecology. And I guess the way that some of those things manifest themselves, grassroots democracy. We don't have citizen initiative here in Maryland. I don't know if you do in Hawaii or not, but we've got Democrats in control of our entire state legislature. And they're the only ones who can like do a constitutional amendment. So one of the issues we're going to be pushing for is to bring citizen initiative to Maryland so that residents can petition to get something on the ballot so that if the Democrats who have a supermajority in the General Assembly don't want to do something that people want to do, people can put it on the ballot. So that's one of the
Nice.
things. I think another thing in that regard is sort of creating a multi-party system here in Maryland so that it is easier for more voices to be heard. I think Hawaii is probably pretty similar in that your legislature is dominated entirely by one party.
Yes.
And most of the state is probably dominated by one party. So we're trying to break that down here because we just think that, there's a lot of Marylanders who are disengaged and disenchanted because they see through the two-party system. So that's the democracy stuff. Um, on the social justice stuff, I think we're going to work a lot on reparations policy. Maryland, the General Assembly just passed a bill which would create a reparations commission for people who were enslaved and for Jim Crow. And that bill's going to be on the next governor's desk. It's going to be one of the first things, or the recommendations from that commission are going to be one of the first things the next governor has to deal with in 2027. And if I'm that governor, I'm going to make sure we turn those recommendations into action. We're not just going to let the symbolism of it be the end of it. We're going to put a bill in the General Assembly that follows those recommendations and gets reparations out to folks. I also think there's some real criminal justice things that we need to look at here in Maryland. We incarcerate we have some of the highest racial disparities in incarceration in the country, and we also have, I think, more people who were locked up as adults that were charged as children than any other state in the country.
Oh wow.
So those
Yeah.
type of things we gotta address those. And then I think like Maryland, Maryland is the state that is most at risk of these federal government cuts that Elon and Trump are pushing through. We have a huge population of federal workers here with DC right here. We have research organizations that are funded by the federal government. We have a whole bunch of contractors and employees. And so I don't think that's coming back. Even if Democrats win all the races in 2026, I don't think a lot of that federal spending is coming back. So we got to start thinking about what an economy looks like that's localized, that manufactures things here in Maryland, and that brings good jobs back that aren't tied to the federal government. So
Right.
lots of stuff, but those are a couple of them to start off with.
Right on. Let's see. The reparations thing you said. Like, what are some of the? Do you know any of like the actual type of things that are going to be the reparations? Like, say, direct money, land, certain education things.
Yeah. So, I mean, the commission is charged with doing the historical and economic analysis from enslavement, Jim Crow, and other state policies. It also looks at institutions like Johns Hopkins and other private institutions that benefited from slavery and from legalized discrimination. So the first thing it's going to do is analyze those, and then it is required to give recommendations about what policies should be used. So
Okay.
things that are up for consideration are cash payments to descendants of freedmen, land tax credits, community reinvestment, and so there's a lot of things that are up for recommendation. And I think, look, these study bills in the hands of Democrats oftentimes end up being a thing where they issue the recommendations, they do the research, and the research and the recommendations don't match.
Right.
I think if we have a governor, though, who's committed to making the recommendations match the research and committed to turning symbolism into action, that kind of commission could be really good. If we don't, it's going to go the way it goes in other places.
Right on. Okay. You said that a lot of the community was disengaged. Do you have a plan to try to get more people engaged?
So first of all, the one of the first things that we need to do is figure out how to listen to people in a different way. So right now, when politicians have town halls, they get their supporters together and they get their supporters together, they screen the questions. They're really staged political productions a lot of times. And sometimes the other side will crash that staged political production and they'll have a yelling match that we'll see on CNN. But that's not real participatory democracy. What real participatory democracy is, I think, is like what if we there's some really good research that says the participants in these types of things should be randomly selected to match the demographics of the area,
Okay.
to match the politics of the area. And then those people should be brought to have real conversation with the elected leaders, not necessarily in front of an audience, not necessarily, or not in an auditorium, more
Right.
like this, more like in an online platform where people can share real ideas. So that type of thing, I think,
Okay.
helps to get real participatory engagement. And there's some really good research about methods for this that people have actually done. So it's not just ideas, but people have actually done it. And the problem is most politicians don't want to do that. They don't want to actually have to face the people who are their
Right.
constituents and hear what their real issues are. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I think creating more, like creating a structure where more parties can flourish, um, I think is a really good step to addressing apathy and addressing de-alignment and disengagement. Because I think what happens is people look at the two-party system and they say, this is not for me. And if you're
Right.
in a place like Baltimore, you can say, this is not for me. And if your other choice is the Republican Party, well, that's not what most people in Baltimore want, and it's not the reason
Right.
that the current system is not for them. And the same thing happens in the rural parts of the state, in the red parts of the state. So there's people there who are frustrated with the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party is not an option. So what you get in that case is you get people who disengage because they really only have one choice, and if they don't like that one choice, then what good is there for them? So two things I think we can do to increase engagement right away: more participatory town halls where more people have a chance to participate, and two, a system that encourages really good, healthy parties to exist at the local, state, and federal level beyond the two parties.
Right. I don't like that. I was looking over your website, and you had a section that said something about beyond election, and it said about like community action or something like that. Could you speak more on that?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, look, I think that the Green Party plays a specific role in social justice movements. We have a ballot line, we run candidates, and we put those candidates into elections. So I think it's important for the Green Party to focus on that role because that's the thing that we do that's unique. If you want somebody who's going to mobilize folks to get out in the street for a protest, or if you want somebody to plant a community garden, there are groups that do that, and we should partner with them and things like that. So I start that to say, I think it's important for the Green Party to focus on electoral politics. Then I think when we get to the beyond elections and electoral politics part, though, it is like if we actually have a core group of folks who are willing to represent the grassroots, the social justice movement, and the people who are left out and behind, then once that party is healthy, it starts to create other associations, it starts to create other ecosystems that can help feed it. So if you look at like the way that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party run, Republicans have their Moms for Liberty. And look, I'm not saying we want Moms for Liberty, but that group exists outside of the party and
Yeah.
mobilizes people. So what if we have, Moms for Justice or Moms for Democracy or Moms for Ecology that was a green group that could form around a strong party committed to grassroots engagement, social justice, ecology, and democracy. So that's kind of what I think about that. It's like if we have a strong Green Party, we can have a strong ecosystem of organizations that may not be the party itself, that may not be running for office, but can still do good and important work with the party as one of its focus points.
Exactly. I like that. I have pretty much the same idea. Like I actually started a nonprofit a few years ago. I didn't want to get into politics. I just wanted to help the community. And then COVID shut down my nonprofit, and I felt like if the government was different, the nonprofits and stuff wouldn't have had to shut down. So I've started looking into running and stuff, and went to the Green Party because I'm obviously not a Democrat or Republican. But I like that a lot. And so one of the things I say is we need to do what needs to be done, right? Just do what needs to be done, regardless if we win or not. And so that's kind of one of the little slogans I was using, and you made me think of that when you were saying that. So I totally agree with you there. Um, when you meet somebody new, like what's your little elevator pitch, or what's one of the things you try to get when you meet somebody for the first time?
Okay, so as you may have noticed, I'm not great at an elevator pitch. I sometimes talk a little while when I
Right.
talk about things, and so I'm working with folks who are trying to help me get better at it. But sometimes I'll ask like, are you happy with the choices you have? Does your community feel better than it did 10 years ago? Do you feel like you're being served by the people in power? Although, like I say, I'm not the most elevator pitchy type of guy. I like to have long conversations with folks, and I think that's okay too.
Yeah.
Part of the reason that I started 4 years, I started as soon as the election was over in 2022. I knew I wanted to run in 2026, and it was because I wanted to be able to go around and have conversations with people all over the state, all over the country, and even all over the world about, what we're trying to do here. So,
Nice.
I'm working on it. I'm working on getting that elevator pitch down, but I sometimes resist that a little bit because I think one of the things the Democrats and Republicans have done is reduce difficult political conversations into sound bites.
Okay, yeah.
And I think sometimes we gotta have conversations about why things are the way they are, how people react to that, and how we can build something better to change those outcomes.
Right on. I agree with that. Yeah, I'm not very great at the elevator pitch either. I kind of keep going and stuff. I feel like there's too many details that you got to add, like don't want to leave stuff out. So I know exactly where you're coming from there.
I mean, we can all get better at it, right? Like just like we can get better at the social media, I think we can get better at the elevator pitch. And I'll say one thing is like making myself make Instagram reels and wanting them to get under that 3 minute mark has helped me to get more succinct because I want it to go to everybody. I don't want it to just go to like the people that follow me.
Right.
And so, I think some of these things are related. As we go and we talk to more people, as we have more real conversations, as we use social media, we'll both get better at those elevator pitches. But yeah, it's important, and I also push back a little bit on, I'll get these campaign folks who worked for a Democrat or a Republican, and they'll be like, you need to make it stupid and make it simple. And I'm like, maybe that works for you all, but that's not what I want to do here.
Right on. So we've had the what was it, the protest last was it last weekend?
Yeah, yeah.
The hands off protest. Did you attend yours?
Sure, we went to the one in Baltimore City. We had a table there, and we were able to talk to a lot of people. We got about, probably a page full of folks that were signing up and interested in learning more about the Green Party. And, I've heard all this criticism of them that was like people weren't talking about Gaza at these things. And I don't know. I didn't, to be honest, I didn't get to hear any of the speakers because I was talking to people the whole time. And we certainly talked about Gaza at our table. We certainly talked about the failures of both the Democrat and the Republican Party and how a system has left everybody behind. So we used it as a chance to talk to voters, and I think we'll be doing the same thing for the May Day one that is happening near us. And we talked about what we wanted to talk about, and we had great conversations with voters.
Right on. We went to the hands off protest too, and like I was walking around, I was talking to the people there. Mostly were Democrats, right? And I was trying to get signatures too for the Green Party, and a lot of them told me no because that they were for the Democrats and that they didn't want to, split the vote and all this stuff. And I'm like, so you're not for like choice, you're not for democracy? And they're like, oh, now's not the time and all this, and they're like scared and whatnot. And I talked to this one lady and her husband for a minute, and I walked off. And then I had to walk back by her to go where I was going or whatever. And I walked by her and she was by herself and she said, I was thinking about what you said to me or whatever. And so we started talking again. But I found that a lot of these, like, there's like grassroots movements or whatever that are at these protests and whatnot. Yeah. And so a lot of them are Democratic, like, infiltrations or whatever, where you go up to them and they're like, oh yeah, progressive. But then you start talking about the Green Party and they're like, oh no, we got to vote for the Democrats. And
Right.
have you found that at your in your looking around for
Yeah, sure.
progressives?
Totally, totally, right? Like, and I mean that is always the case. It was the case when Trump was running. It's the case now that Trump is in office. And I think it becomes this opportunity for folks to say, "Well, I don't want to talk about the difficult stuff. I don't want to talk about Gaza. I don't want to talk about how both parties are controlled by billionaires and corporations. We just need to stop Trump." And then, okay, I can understand where people are coming from in that. And it's so funny because it's like Hawaii and Maryland, right? Like if either Hawaii or Maryland ever vote for Trump, like we're in real trouble, right?
Right. We can split our vote all the way in half and ain't no Republicans winning.
Right, right. Like, and it's like, I mean, I think Hawaii and Maryland are the like two states that have Hawaii, Maryland, and Vermont probably are the three states that have most consistently rejected Trump at the ballot box. They've rejected the MAGA folks in the state legislature. Like, there's no MAGA person winning anything in Maryland at a statewide level, and I think that's the case for you too, right? Like,
Yeah, there's no. We probably had five Republicans in the past 20 years, like in all spots, right? We'll have one here and there, but not very often.
yeah, and I mean for us it's a little different because the rural parts of the state. So for Maryland, the key population centers are around Baltimore, DC, and the suburbs that are around there. And those are consistently Democrat voting in presidential elections, consistently Democrat in most of the General Assembly and the local elections. And then everything else, the rural parts of the state don't have many people, but they vote for Republicans pretty consistently. So we do have some Republicans elected statewide, but Democrats have have a decades-long veto-proof majority in our General Assembly,
Right.
and they control every one of the statewide executive offices, and they control the eight most populous counties. They can do whatever they want here. And sometimes what I'll say to those folks who are like, now is not the time, is like, look, now is absolutely the time, right? Like all the things that these people are up on stage talking about wanting, like, at the one, they're talking about we want to defend our Social Security, we want health care, we want to treat immigrants well, we want to do all these things. Well, Democrats seem like a party that are willing to compromise on a lot of those things right now. And I think the stronger the Green Party is, and the more threatened they feel by the Green Party, the less likely they are to compromise with the Republicans, and the more likely they are to stick to the values that are propelling those protests in the first place. So I sort
You
of
think
will
more highly
sometimes
of
say
them
to
than I do.
folks like, "Hey, like it's in your best interest if we're stronger. When we're weak, the only place that you can compromise is with Republicans, and that's that ratchet effect. But if we're stronger, like." You can use us as leverage to get your corporate Democrats to do stuff.
Oh, okay. So you're more right on. I feel what you're saying. Um, so, like you said, both Hawaii and Maryland are very, very blue. Been blue for a long time. Like I always ask the people, what have the Democrats done for us? What have they done in your city, your state, specifically? That's like better than the Republicans. Like Texas and Florida are decent states. They have some laws that we don't, that we might not want. But like we're not so much better than them. We don't have universal health care. We don't like our schools aren't way better. Like they might be slightly better, but we're not like pumping out. Like we still need the H1B1 visa or whatever because we're not pumping out scientists and doctors and stuff like that, right? Like the Democratic states aren't doing so much better than the Republican states that I see.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's like, Maryland had a bill to ban local sheriffs from cooperating with ICE. To end these 287G agreements for local sheriffs serve as a pipeline for deportation for ICE. And it passed one of the houses, it passed the House of Delegates, and then the Democratic president of the state Senate killed it. Because he was afraid of Trump cutting his funding or whatever. And like we can
Mm.
have a real conversation about that funding thing, but if there's any place that should be able to defend immigrants from MAGA sheriffs cooperating with ICE in order to have a deportation pipeline, it should be Maryland. We are so, we are a majority minority state. We have a Democratic supermajority. It's shocking that that type of thing happens, there was another bill that would have stopped auto charging young people as adults for certain crimes. And remember, I said Maryland
Mm.
has the
Right.
largest population of people in its adult prisons who were charged as adults when they were children. Simple bill. It doesn't even say that the courts couldn't have charged those people with that. It says that they are just not automatically
Right.
charged with that, and that bill couldn't get out of the House,
I
or
think I
couldn't
heard
get
of
out of
that.
right. It's just and then there was another bill that would have given renters good cause eviction protection, so that landlords couldn't just evict folks with no reason. And they've been trying for a decade in Maryland to get that passed. Meanwhile, didn't pass this year, and we have some of the highest eviction rates of any state in the country.
Mm.
We have some of the highest housing costs and some of the highest eviction rates of any state in the country. And it's like bread and butter things like that. Why can't Democrats, when they have control of both houses and all the counties and all the executive branches, um, pass something that protects renters who are most certainly mostly voting for Democrats,
Right. Yeah.
right? Right? Like, and they can't because they get too much money from the landlords and the corporate housing developers. That's why they can't do it. And
Exactly.
it's like, oftentimes I think there's always a follow the money type of thing. You want to know why Democrats are disappointing you? Figure out who is giving them money and who's paying for their campaigns.
And yeah, and so that brings me. So they talk about this anti-oligarchy tour, talking about the oligarchy all the time. And
Yeah,
so what I was telling the people at the protest and what like I can't the thought of like you can't fight the oligarchy without breaking the duopoly, like because
right.
the Democrats are just as corporate as the Republicans, and so like they talk about all the oligarchy, but we're gonna vote for the Democrats, and I'm like. It doesn't make any sense. Like you don't understand what an oligarchy is or what the Democrats do. Like, yeah, it's so crazy to me, like how they say that. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, like I think we've all seen this show before. And now starring AOC. Like, okay,
Right,
great. Like, I'm glad, and I'm glad they're going out. I'm glad they're going to these red districts, and I'm glad they're talking to folks about this. I do think there's commonality on some of these economic justice issues. When we get away from the culture war issues, right? When we get away from those things that the two parties use in order to create division, I actually think there's a lot of class unity between poor and working class red districts and poor and working class blue districts. And one of the things that we've found as we travel across the state is it doesn't matter if we're in a suburb of DC or in the western part of the state in Appalachia. Um, Folks are worried about the cost of housing. Folks are worried about the cost of healthcare. Folks are worried that their wages aren't keeping pace with inflation. And so I think there is some value in Bernie and AOC crossing those lines. I think the research is right. I think the analysis about the problem is right. And I think the recommendation to vote for more Democrats is terrible,
right,
right? Like, I think it's one of these things where it's like, I think often Democratic politicians are good at getting the research right about the problem. They're good at getting the analysis right about the problem. The Bernie AOC wing of the party, not the other folks. They're
right. Yeah.
good about the research and the analysis, but the recommendations and the actions they take don't match the research and the analysis that they
Right.
have. And so I think what you're pointing out is exactly the right thing to point out. Like it's not that they're not right about the problem, it's that they're not right about the solution.
So a lot of people on the left would say that they're kind of sheep herding, right? They're
Yeah.
saying the right thing, but then because 2016, I was done with the Democratic Party. Like I was a big Barack fan. Like I liked that hope and change. I was all excited and stuff. And then after he didn't do anything and he passed this terrible health care bill, I was done with the Democrats. But then Bernie came and I was like, all right, I can try this. And then they cheated him. And another thing I bring up to people is that a big reason we have Donald Trump is because Hillary Clinton and her Pied Piper strategy, right? Like they pumped him up. We have Trump because of the Democrats. So you guys want to vote for the Democrats again still? Like I find that odd. But like just Bernie did it twice. He did it in 2016, 2020 or 2020, and now doing it again after Trump won, but doing it and still talking about the Democrats. Now he's saying you can vote independent a little bit, but it's not time for a third party. But he's been independent for what, 30, 50 years, something like that. Had he been in the Green Party that whole time, how much bigger would it be? Had he been in DSA or any left wing party, how much bigger would it be? So, like, to be independent, I think you're kind of wasting the power that you could have. And there are some states where the Green Party might not be on the ticket and you might need to run independent, but still, like, call yourself an independent Green or something like that. But, how do you feel about the people who think that they're like kind of maybe sheep herding and they might not be as genuine with their analyzation of the like analyzing the problem? They know what the problem is and they're more genuine with their solution where they really want you to be in the Democrats. They're not. They're just saying what we want to hear, but trying to tell us to go where they want us to go, kind of.
Yeah, so let me answer this via a story about Bernie. Um, so I lived in Burlington, Vermont, in 1999 and in 2000.
Okay.
And in 1999, when the U.S. and NATO were bombing Serbia in order to liberate Kosovo, I went to a protest. It was a protest organized by a guy named Will Miller. Will was a longtime peace advocate in Vermont, and he was also a key founder of the Vermont Liberty Party, which was a Vermont third party that had values very similar to the Green Party, multi-party democracy, socialized medicine, anti-war. And he was a Veterans for Peace guy that had been in that. So we went to the two senators at the time, Jeffords and Leahy's office. They both were supporting the bombing of Kosovo or bombing of Serbia, but they were nice to us. They gave us cookies and they let us talk to the senator, and the staff was nice to us. We went to Bernie's office, and Bernie was the House representative for Vermont at the time. He wasn't there, but we got to his office and we sat down and we started doing a little bit of chanting and a little bit of saying, like, no war here. And pretty quickly, Bernie's staff said, if you don't get out of here right now, we're going to call the police
Oh,
and we're going to arrest you.
okay.
So we kind of knew that that was going to happen. But we said, okay, we'll go ahead, call the police, have us arrested. So 8 of us got arrested in Bernie's office, protesting his support for the war in
Mm.
Kosovo. Now, the backstory here is that Will and Bernie had been very, very close friends when Bernie was a third party guy. When Bernie was a third party guy, when he was the mayor of Burlington, he was the socialist mayor of Burlington or whatever. He and Will were very tight, very close. He and Will broke over his desire to go into the Democratic Party as the pathway for being able to bring about the changes that that both agreed needed to happen. And that break was a dirty break. They were good friends, and then they became sort of enemies as a result of that. And I say that to say that the
Mm.
question for Bernie of inside or outside of the Democratic Party has been a question that has been there for much of his political life. Because he started outside. He started outside,
Right.
and then he decided to go inside. And so Will knew that this was an issue that got under Bernie's skin, and Will took us there to get arrested, right? Like he knew this and all of that.
Right.
But I say that to say that like Bernie has this. This is not a new discussion to Bernie. It has been part of his political trajectory for the last 40 years or so.
Right.
And he has made a choice that the Democratic Party is the place to go. Will and I think that that is probably one of the most damaging choices in American politics
I
in
agree.
our lifetimes. If Bernie had decided that he was going to be the guy who led a new American Labor Party, a new American Progressive Party, a new
Right.
Democratic Socialist Party, I believe he could have done it. And I believe he has had the opportunity to do it at a dozen inflection points in his life, and he has always chosen to go back to the Democratic Party. Now, he may do this trick where he says, I'm an independent,
Right.
but he runs in Democratic primaries, he caucuses with the Democratic
Right.
primary, with the Democratic Party, and there's no real power in being an independent beyond your personal power, right? Like, if we want to talk about collective power comes from a party.
Right.
Collective power comes from a union. And Bernie has eschewed that and decided to go this individual route. And it's like, okay, like as independent Democrats go, he's got a lot of policies and ideas that are really valuable. But I think the political organizing choice that he has made to channel all of that into the Democratic Party over and
Right.
over and over again has been bad for him and bad for the world.
Right. Bad for the movement. Yes. Bad for everybody. Because like I try to tell people, if he would have gone in 2016 to the Green Party, we would have fostered that movement. Right. We would have helped build the movement and took it and ran with it and loved it. The Democratic Party wanted nothing to do with it.
Yeah. And one of the things that I'll often say is like, I believe in the Green Party right now. The Green Party is the one that is organized. It is the one that has the ballot lines. And the work that we do in the Green Party to break down the duopoly and show another opportunity might not ultimately lead to the Green Party being the one that arises to represent that movement. Some
Mm.
other party may be the one that does that, and that's okay, right? Like, I care about the outcomes. I care about a
There you
world where
go.
justice, peace, democracy, and ecology are at the forefront of a political party, not corporations and control. And I am happy to have it be the Democratic Party right now. But if Bernie wanted to form a truly independent, progressive grassroots party to take on the Democratic Party and the Republican Party and the duopoly and the oligarchy, great, go for it. Right? Like I'm not going to get like Green Party like tattooed across my chest or something like it's a oath of loyalty. I believe in it because it's the functional place where I think we can do this work right now. But if somebody presented a better idea for a better party that shared the values and was not going to take corporate money and was not going to get bought out by the oligarchs, sign me up if it's
Right.
more effective, you know?
Right, yep. So one of the things we talked about is that the Green Party needs to get out there more. I've seen you on a couple shows. Can you tell my audience where you've been? If they can look you up and check you out on the other shows you've been on?
Oh yes, sure. So let's see. I've done the Letter Hack recently. I did Sabby Sabs recently. I'm doing Eclectic Radical show pretty soon. I got my own podcast at gogreen26.com/podcast. I think you can see my show there. I'm actually doing some sort of mainstream podcast this week with there's a local journalist named Jane Miller who used to be the
Nice.
investigative reporter for the ABC station here, and she left and has her own podcast now. So this week I'm
Cool.
doing an episode of that, and that's like mainstream liberal talk radio type of thing. So
Very
doing
nice.
that. And I will go on if anybody's out there listening and you have a podcast and you want to talk to a Green Party candidate, I will happily come on. I'll happily talk to anybody. I think it's an important thing for us to be out there on these shows, sharing our ideas and values,
Yes.
sharing who we are, sharing how we got here, and sharing what we believe is important.
Right on. I agree totally. Is there anything else you would like to tell my audience?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me come on today. I really appreciate this conversation. I think we talked over email last year. I interviewed Coda when he was running
Okay.
for state delegate, and I think it's important to make these connections. It's important for
Yes.
places as far apart geographically as Hawaii and Maryland to be able to get on a call and talk about this stuff and let folks see what the similarities and differences are. So thank you for having me on. And folks can check out our website at gogreen2026.com. And we're always, if there's anybody who feels particularly moved and they want to donate, we'll obviously take those donations. We don't take any money from PACs. We don't take any money from, shady slush funds of money that pay for politicians. Everything we do is from, working folks like me and you and folks that can contribute. So, we're trying to get out there, run a statewide campaign, and get as many people to know about it as possible. So, yeah, check out the website, check us out on socials, donate if you feel inclined. And if you want me on your podcast, just let me know. I'll be happy to come on, just like we did this one.
Very cool. I will definitely put your website in the description. I'll look up a couple of the shows you've done and put those in descriptions, the ones I can find, so that people can find you a little bit easier. But
Okay.
if you're down, we can do this again sometime.
Yeah.
All right.
Whenever.
But thank you for coming on, and like I said, we'll do this again.